Good evening, everyone. Right, so Charter Act 1793 came under which Governor General? So therefore, it is influenced by what you call as your ideas of Cornwallis. So 8693. So he would have been consulted during the time period of preparation of the charter. Right. So the heading is socio-religious reforms. In the socio-religious reforms, first we are going to discuss those kind of organizations. We are going to discuss Young Bengal. Right, Young Bengal, it was an organization which basically focused upon what you call as the convincing the people for social reforms only on the basis of logic. Right. Another kind of organizations were like Brahmo Samaj of Raja Rammohn Roy, who used not just logic but also scriptures to convince the people that as per the scriptures, this is the wrong behavior and this is the right behavior. Right. So that is going to be the focus. Also, we are going to talk about the reasons for socio-religious reforms. Right. For example, one of the reasons for socio-religious reforms was that the Western educated sections of the society, right, they wanted modernism in society. That is, they wanted to get rid of feudal practices. Feudal is something which is old and backward. Right. So therefore, if there are different kind of social ills, so they want to get rid of that because it is not logical. Right, it is not in line with logic. Why? Because in Western education you study Western sciences, right? You study logic, right? Jitni bhi Western sciences, all of them are based on logic. So therefore, they try to apply that logic in the society also. That how is it logical that there should be child marriage? How is it logical that there should not be widow marriage? How is it logical that there should be casteism? How is it logical that there should be extra focus on idol worship? How is it logical that there should be polygamy? Right, and how is it logical that there is polytheism? Polytheism means a belief that there are multiple gods. Right. So one aspect was logic, rationality. Right. So because they have studied logic, rationality, they are Western educated. So they also wanted modern society in India, and therefore that became one of the motivation. Second motivation was cultural nationalism. That is some mild form of cultural nationalism. Culture means our society, our religion, our language, our architecture. It includes all of these elements, they are included in culture. Cultural nationalism means a sense of pride for them. So when the Britishers, they started criticizing, after 1813 we know, rule India the Indian way, or Orientalism, it gradually faded away after 1813. Right? So until 1813, the Britishers, at least they used to agree that ancient Indian civilization is a great civilization. But after 1813, for example, utilitarianists, they said that ancient Indian civilization is great. This is a myth. This is false. And what India needs is an effective schoolmaster, said James Mill. Right. Similarly, the evangelists, they said that the biggest thing which is wrong with India is its religion. Therefore, Christianize India to modernize India. Liberals, they said, give India the best ideas of the age. And what are the best ideas of the age? The British ideas of the age. Right. So be it education or be it other aspects of the society, social practices, implement the British way. Stop ruling India the India way. You are not fulfilling the white man's burden by ruling India the India way. Why? Because India is denied the best ideas of the age, because aap keh rahe hain, we will rule India the India way. Right? Because you are saying that we will not Christianize India. So you are depriving India of the best religion in the world. That is Christianity. This is the view of the Britishers. Right. So therefore, when the Britishers, they started criticizing the Indian civilization a lot after 1813. So therefore, some kind of anger was also present among these social reformers. And they wanted to prove to the Britishers that ancient Indian civilization is indeed great. And B, how will you prove that? By, for example, doing a discussion and debate on the Shastras, right, among each other, among Indians. And prove it to the British also, that see, as per the Shastras, these social ills, they do not have a place in the true Indian civilization or true Indian society. And therefore, this is how we will be able to prove to the Britishers that Indian civilization is indeed great. Yes, जो आपको समाज में negative दिख रहे हैं, all of these negatives which are visible in the society, they are a degeneration. They are a product of degeneration, decay. Right? They are not originally present in the Indian scriptures. Right? So therefore, this is how they will be able to give a response to the British. Plus, they are not just present in the scriptures, we will prove that they can be implemented also. So we are going to convince the people of the Indian society to give up these negative social practices. So in practice also, we will prove it to you that we are indeed a great civilization, Therefore, we'll do social reform. And in theory also, we'll prove it to you that we are a great Indian civilization. So therefore, these two aspects primarily, they became the reason for the socio-religious reforms. They became the reason in the socio-religious reforms, right? So therefore, that is the aspect, right? So, Orientalism, it is there in the socio-religious reform or not? So basically, in the domain of society, yes, it is there, right? For example, when you say that rule India the India way, or there should be true India way in the society. There should be true India way in the society. So in that sense, Orientalism is there. But yes, at the same time, Raja Ram Mohan Roy, etc. Example, in the domain of education, there they did not want the India way. So it is a mix. Right? So therefore, Raja Ram Mohan Roy can be seen as a person who wants a scientist, but who has also applied a tilak. Right? So therefore, but tilak का जो color है वो उतना dark नहीं है, light है. Whereas Swami Vivekananda is the person who wants a scientist, but who has applied a very strong tilak. This kind of scenario. Right? So more cultural nationalism will come after 1857 when the Britishers they start saying that dogs and Indians are not allowed. When they become extra racist, then even more cultural nationalism will come. Right? So yeah. So right now, intro dash till 1813 Orientalist ideology till 1813 Orientalist ideology till 1813 Orientalist ideology operated. Orientalist ideology operated. Therefore, non-interference by British. Therefore, non-interference by British in socio-religious reforms. Non-interference by British in socio-religious domain. In socio-religious domain. This was also because of desire to prevent. This was also because of desire to prevent negative reaction from Indians. Desire to prevent negative reaction from Indians. Negative reaction from Indians. Negative reaction from Indians. However, 1813 plus, Orientalism gave way to liberalism. Orientalism gave way to liberalism, comma, evangelicalism, EV angel, IC evangelicalism, and utilitarianism. UTILI, utilitarianism, and utilitarianism. Therefore, push to westernization of India. Therefore, push to westernization of India. And greater push to WM burden. And greater push to WM burden. Greater push to WM burden. Full stop. Therefore, Western education and social reforms. Therefore, Western education and social reforms introduced by British. Western education and social reforms introduced by British mainly after 1813. Mainly after 1813. Full stop. Regarding education, debate on Western education versus Indian education. debate on Western education versus Indian education from 1813-33. Debate on Western education versus Indian education from 1813 to 1833. Dash settled in 1835. Settled in 1835 in favor of Western education in English language. Settled in 1835 in favor of Western education in English language. In English language via Macaulay's minute. Via Macaulay's minute, it means policy. Macaulay's minute on Indian education, or Macaulay's minute on education, 1835. Macaulay's minute on education, 1835. Macaulay's minute on education, 1835. Minute, it basically means policy, right? So why it is taking 20 years to settle this debate? Because it is not that Orientalism will end immediately. It will gradually fade away, and therefore this debate was there. But because it is fading away and other ideologies which want to westernize India, they are rising up. Therefore victory belongs to the other ideologies, and therefore ultimately after 20 years it is settled in the favor of English language and Western education. Meaning the content is going to be Western, right? You're going to study Western humanities, Western sciences, right? Western history also, but the language, it is also going to be English language, right? Instead of studying Indian education, that is for example Indian Shastras or Hindu law, Islamic law, etc. ठीक है, वो नहीं पढ़ा जाएगा. This kind of scenario, right? Next point write down reasons for push to Western education. Reasons for push to Western education. So there are broadly 3-4 reasons which are there to push to Western education, right? The number one focus of the Britishers to push the Western education was to convert Indians, especially the rich Indians, into brown sahibs. Brown sahibs. Brown means the color of the skin. Sahib means Britishers from inside. So from the outside you are an Indian, but from the inside you are a Firangi, right? And that means to colonize the Indian mind. That famously called colonial mentality. Therefore, they wanted to develop colonial mentality. And how do you develop colonial mentality? By catching them young. That is, from the childhood itself, if the students, they are studying glorification of the British culture, British society, British polity, British economy, right? That is, whatever there is there in Britain, that is great. So therefore, obviously, you will rise up you will grow up as a fan of Britain, right? And you would come to believe that British rule will modernize India. You'll come to believe that British rule is good for India, right? So when you're studying these stories, right, that, you know, there are trains which are there, right, or there are steam engine, it is there in Britain, right, that British society is so great, democracy developed there first. So therefore you will believe that because we are also now part of the same family. India is also part of the British Empire. So one day all of these things, they will come to India also. In polity, democracy will come, gradually the Britishers, because they are the first democracy. तो ये लोग डेमोक्रेसी नहीं लाएंगे तो और कौन लाएगा, right? Britishers, they are the first ones to have industrial revolution, so therefore they have the technology and the money to industrialize India, right? The scientific revolution, it happened in Western Europe, so therefore they will bring these sciences in India, and one day India will get converted into Britain and Delhi into London, or Calcutta was the capital, so Calcutta into London. So therefore, and this is how they will support the British rule. Obviously, education will not be free, and therefore only the rich people, they will be able to afford this education. Proof हमारे सामने है, in 1857 revolt, the Western educated strata of the society, it did not support the 1857, right? So therefore, they were successful also in that case, right? So that is like one of the things. Second was to reduce the cost of administration. To reduce the cost of administration, especially in lower bureaucracy. Especially in lower bureaucracy, if we can have Indians, obviously an Indian person will be taking less salary compared to a person who is traveling all across from Britain to India, right? To make the job in India attractive, ठीक है, यहाँ पे तो अंग्रेजों को गर्मी बहुत लगेगी, राइट, दे विल बी सेइंग इट इज सो स्वेटी, राइट, द फूड इज सो स्पाइसी, दे विल हैव मलेरिया, राइट, देयर बॉडीज आर नॉट attenuated to the diseases which are there in this part of the world, right, and otherwise also, right. So therefore, to make that job attractive, they would have to give decent amount of money to them, right. So it is better that at the senior positions we should have Britishers, but at the junior levels let us have Indians. And if we are training them in Western education, if they know Western administration, Western public administration, if they know Western good governance, if they know Western law, right, so therefore they will be able to help the DC, DM, right, etc., in a very good manner, right. So cost of administration will come down, so we'll be spending less amount of money from whatever taxes that we are earning. We are spending less amount of money on the expenses of the administration, right. Then there was also some people who believed that Western education will actually let us fulfill white man's burden, right. So कुछ उस प्रकार से भी होंगे. And then from the Indian side also, the rich Indians, they wanted Western education, especially the middle class Indians. Because now, as for example, you are a zamindar, right? You have 10 children, right? You are another zamindar, you have 8, right? You have 9. तुम्हें कितने करने हैं? 15, 15. He has 15 children. So gradually property will get divided, right. Then your children, they will also have multiple children. So over a period of time, what can happen is that the land holdings, they might not be as attractive as they were, some generations back. And therefore, as a result, you will ask your grandchildren that ये अभी ज़मीन का ठीक है, वो side में रहने दो, but now you prepare for UPSC, or now you prepare for being a lawyer, or being a doctor. Why? Because to be monetarily relevant in the society, this kind of scenario, right. So therefore there was these are the people who are benefiting from the jobs created by the British rule. A doctor is studying Western medicine, not he is studying allopathy, not Ayurveda. A lawyer is basically reading Western law, not the Hindu law or Islamic law, right. A professor is teaching the Western education and not the Indian education. A UPSC aspirant is studying the, वो तो 1853 में आएगा, ठीक है. So UPSC aspirant after 1853 will be studying the Western content, right. So therefore these are the people, at least they can enter in the lower bureaucracy from 1833, right. Lower uncovenanted civil services, they were opened in 1833. Judicial positions were also opened in 1833. So therefore this section of the society, right, you are a grandfather and you're like, I want to teach my grandchildren to become a lawyer, doctor, etc. And then you see that there is only one school which is teaching Western education. So will you not want that there should be more schools which teach Western education? You would want more libraries, so the books which have the content in Western education, they are very easily available, right. So therefore you will, if anyone asks you, then you will be supporting the Western education. You would want more schools and colleges which are teaching Western education. So therefore this segment of the Indian society also supported Western education for selfish reasons. Plus those who are already somewhat Western educated, they want more Western education because they also believe that Western education will modernize India. That people, they should know what is democracy. People, they should know what is capitalism, what is your industrialization, right. They should know modern philosophy, they should know modern psychology, etc., इस प्रकार से, right. So therefore they genuinely, they are genuinely believing that this will modernize India. So therefore that's why they are also supporting the Western education. So right on, first sub point. अभी तो work opportunity, क्या work opportunity? हाँ, जैसे कौन से काम करने के ऑप्शंस ज्यादा रहेंगे? जैसे हैं, लॉयर्स की बात करी, डॉक्टर की बात करी, ठीक है, हाँ करी. फिर तो आप क्या कहना चाहते हो? मतलब जो मैंने अंग्रेजी में बोला उसको आप हिंदी में रिपीट कर रहे हो मेरे सामने, हद हो गई. कह रहे हैं सर वेस्टर्न एजुकेशन से जो काम होंगे वो काम भी कर पाएंगे. तो भाई मैं वही तो कह रहा हूं इतनी देर से, हद हो गई यार. वही तो मैंने कहा, आपने उसका हिंदी में अनुवाद कर दिया, अलग लेवल पे सेट हो आप, राइट. फर्स्ट सब पॉइंट, डिक्रीज कॉस्ट. of administration, decrease cost of administration, decrease cost of administration by having, decrease cost of administration by having Indians in lower bureaucracy, decrease cost of administration by having Indians in lower bureaucracy, in lower bureaucracy, in lower bureaucracy. Second sub-point, create a loyal class in form of, create a loyal class in form of educated middle class, create a loyal class in form of educated middle class. That is Brown Sahib. That is Brown Sahib. Argued Macaulay. Brown Sahib argued Macaulay. Brown Sahib argued Macaulay. That is Indian from outside. That is Indian from outside. Argued Macaulay. That is Indian from outside but British from inside. Indian from outside, British from inside. Indian from outside, British from inside. British from inside. British from inside. As Western education, as Western education, as Western education glorified the British, as Western education glorified the British, as Western education glorified the British, as Western education glorified the British. Full stop. Therefore, to increase stability of British rule. 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 Obviously, British rule will be more stable if there is a loyal class of Indians who wants them here. Third sub-point, to create a market for British goods. To create a market for British goods. And therefore increase, to create a market for British goods and therefore increase British exports and therefore increase British exports and therefore increase British exports. Therefore increase British exports. Right. So, for example, if you imagine a scenario that you are a child, right, and you are going to school, and the story is there, right, and in that story, for example, the story is like that a family is waking up in the morning, right, and the father is brushing his teeth with that toothbrush. He is having that mirror and a English wash basin in front of him. Then he uses a English soap, towel, etc. He dresses in a English suit, right, etc., 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 etc. So therefore, don't you think that one day this child would want, he would have such a mind that one day when I'll become big माने कि जब मैं बड़ा हो जाऊंगा, when I'll grow up, then I'll be doing all of these same things. I also want, he might ask his parents, why don't we have a wash basin? In the story there is a wash basin, right? Why Papa is wearing this dhoti? In the story, Papa wears tuxedo, right? Suit pant, whatever, right? So you see, today all of us are wearing, और मैं तो blazer पहन के आया हूँ. So I am representing the colonial mentality, right? So therefore, what is style? Right? The style today is the Western clothing. That is style. That is swag. ठीक है? तुम कहते धोती और कहते तिलक लगा के पहुंच जाओ इज़ारे इश्क करने के लिए. Colonial mentality. Someone might call you backward also, but you understand. गलती तुम्हारी नहीं है. She is colonial mentality. ठीक? तो तुम दुखी मत हो ना. Colonial mentality. Right, I am also wearing this, right, the culture वो बन गया है. And if there is any person we see who is from a village, right, wearing the traditional Indian dress, what does our colonial mentality tells us? That most probably, he is not that educated. And you will be pretty surprised if he starts speaking in English. Right, then you will be like, यार ये कैसे, तो फिर ये क्यों पहना हुआ है आपने? युवराज, कितना अच्छा इंग्लिश बोल रहे हो, तो ये क्यों पहना हुआ है? ये क्या है भाई? इंडियन क्लोथ्स है, ये क्यों पहना हुआ है क्या? गांधी जी तो ऊपर कुछ भी नहीं पहनते, तो उनके तो आप फैन हो. पहना हुआ यार, इंडियन कपड़े पहने हुए हैं, और गांधी जी भी इंडियन कपड़े ही पहनते थे जितने पहनते थे नीचे वाले, ऊपर तो नहीं पहनते थे, मतलब इंडियन वो। भाई गांधी जी इज द बिगेस्ट सिंबल ऑफ कल्चरल नेशनलिज्म वैसे, मतलब ये तो जोक्स हो गए, बट अदरवाइज फॉर एग्जांपल व्हाट ही वांटेड टू एस्टैब्लिश वाज राम राज्य, right? So therefore Gandhiji used the positive aspects of religion a lot, right? He tried to use these things because he knew that the common man is basically not western educated, the common man is not yet this brown sahib kind of scenario. So anyways, right? So aisa, right? So ek market create hogi, demand will be generated for British products which are made in British factories, and therefore economic utility of colonial mentality, economic utility of colonial mentality, right? Next sub point, middle class Indians supported Western education. Middle class Indians supported Western education. Middle class Indians supported Western education due to personal interests. Due to personal interests. Due to personal interests in jobs created by British rule. Due to personal interests in jobs created by British rule. In jobs created by British rule. In brackets, bureaucracy, bureaucracy, lawyers, doctors, teachers, bureaucracy, lawyers, doctors, teachers, engineers, etc. Lawyers, doctors, teachers, engineers, etc. Brackets closed. Plus they believed that only Western education, plus they believed that only Western education and Western sciences, plus they believed that only Western education and Western sciences, Western education and Western sciences can modernize India. Western education and Western sciences can modernize India. Can modernize India. And lead to industrialization. And lead to industrialization. And lead to industrialization. Plus for them, it was also, plus for them, it was also, नहीं काट दो ये लाइन काट दो, नेक्स्ट इंडिपेंडेंट पैराग्राफ पॉइंट लिखेंगे, नेक्स्ट इंडिपेंडेंट पैराग्राफ पॉइंट। तो वेस्टर्न एजुकेशन वाली रीजन हमने लिख दिए, अब एक्चुअली सोशल रिफॉर्म्स पे आते हैं, ठीक है, अपार्ट फ्रॉम द वेस्टर्न एजुकेशन नेक्स्ट वाले, राइट। सो ये पॉइंट हम एक्सप्लेन तो कर ही चुके हैं। सो राइट डाउन, फॉर एजुकेटेड इंडियंस, फॉर एजुकेटेड इंडियंस, नहीं नेक्स्ट इंडिपेंडेंट पैराग्राफ पॉइंट है, वेस्टर्न एजुकेशन खत्म हो गया है, ठीक। फॉर एजुकेटेड इंडियंस, social reforms, for educated Indians, social reforms were also a response, social reforms were also a response to British civilizational critique of India, to British civilizational critique of India, to British civilizational critique of India. That increased in 19th century. 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 And now British argued, that greatness of Indian civilization, and now British argued that greatness of Indian civilization was a myth. Now British argued that greatness of Indian civilization is a myth. Full stop. Therefore, cultural nationalism was a reason. Cultural nationalism was a reason for social reforms. Cultural nationalism was a reason for social reforms. For social reforms. As reformers wanted to prove, as reformers wanted to prove that Indian scriptures do not support social ills. Indian scriptures do not support social ills. Plus B. Plus B. That plus B, ठीक है, क्या लिखा हमने? Do not support social ills. Plus B. To prove that in practice, India can achieve greatness of past. To prove that in practice, India can achieve greatness of past. India can achieve greatness of past. Greatness of past. And therefore, Indian civilization not inferior. And therefore, Indian civilization was not inferior. And therefore, Indian civilization was not inferior. Right? Next independent paragraph point. Two groups of early social reformers. Two groups of early social reformers. Two groups of early social reformers. In brackets, first half 19th century. In brackets, first half of 19th century. Brackets closed. First half of 19th century, brackets closed. First subpoint. Those who relied purely on logic, comma reason slash rationality, logic, comma reason slash rationality, logic, comma reason slash rationality, या फिर लॉजिक स्लैश रीजन स्लैश रेशनैलिटी, तीनों एक ही चीजें हैं. लॉजिक, रीजन, रेशनैलिटी, टू आर्ग्यू फॉर सोशल रिफॉर्म्स, टू आर्ग्यू फॉर सोशल रिफॉर्म्स, टू आर्ग्यू फॉर सोशल रिफॉर्म्स. Second subpoint. Those who used scriptures to argue for social reforms. Those who use scriptures to argue for social reforms. And therefore tried to find support for logic, reason, rationality. Therefore, tried to find support for logic slash reason slash rationality. Logic slash reason slash rationality in Indian scriptures. In Indian scriptures. In Indian scriptures. In Indian scriptures. Therefore, they argued that true Indian religion supports social reforms, and is in line with doctrine of and is in line with doctrine of reason and of humanism. Is in line with doctrine of reason and of humanism. In line. In line माने कि not in conflict. Not in conflict. हाँ, इन लाइन मतलब अलाइन वाला इन लाइन कि हम भी शास्त्रास भी यही कहते हैं जो आपका लॉजिक कह रहे हैं ना, तो देर इज लॉजिक इन द शास्त्रास, लॉजिकल थिंग्स आर देयर इन द शास्त्रास, दैट इज द मीनिंग इन लाइन विद लॉजिक एंड डॉक्ट्राइन ऑफ रीजन, दैट इज लॉजिक रैशनैलिटी एंड डॉक्ट्राइन ऑफ ह्यूमनिज्म. व्हाट डू मीन बाय डॉक्ट्राइन ऑफ ह्यूमनिज्म? सो ब्राइट विस्तार लगा के लिखिए. ह्यूमनिज्म इंप्लाइज, ह्यूमनिज्म इज इक्वल टू humanism is equal to focus on welfare, focus on happiness. Humanism is equal to focus on happiness of man, focus on happiness of man, focus on happiness of man in all spheres of life, in all spheres of life, in all spheres of life. Brackets closed. Brackets closed. So therefore, humanism माने focus on welfare. What kind of, जैसे enlightenment is also a product of humanism, right? So when you focus on welfare of human being, happiness of human being, so what kind of polity will bring happiness to each individual? Answer comes out: democracy. Right? What kind of economy will bring happiness to each individual? Such an economy which has capitalism, that is freedom of business, freedom to do any kind of work, right, with security of property. What will make a person happy in the domain of art and culture, right? So therefore focus on individual, right? So therefore these kind of things are there, right? What will make individual happy in the domain of religion? Get rid of negative religious aspects and have some new religion or maybe reform a religion, this kind of service. So happiness, because human person is a social being and his happiness is influenced by all of these factors, right? So that is the meaning of humanism, doctrine of humanism, that is focus on liberty of each individual, happiness of each individual, right? Full stop. This was also to have greater acceptability. This was also to have greater acceptability of suggested reforms. This was also to have greater acceptability of suggested reforms. Greater acceptability of suggested reforms. I gave you the example yesterday. You should not do child marriage, right? A person says, why? Because it is illogical. You like, pare hat, illogical. It is in line with my religion, right? तू तो गैर धार्मिक आदमी है, निकल यहाँ से, गलती हुई तेरे को शादी बुला के, गेट आउट. ठीक है, तुम मंडप पे जाके खड़े हो गया. You are member of Young Bengal who only relies on logic, right? वहां पे चाइल्ड मैरिज हो रही है and you are like, मैं ये शादी नहीं होने दूंगा, it is illogical. It is again doctrine of humanism, right? बात आप ठीक कर रहे हो. But the point is, everyone who is attending that marriage and the people also who are getting married, they are all religious. And they are like कि हमारा धर्म यही कहता है. This is what religion says. So get out. This kind of scenario, right? And जो plate खाना खाए उसका पैसा देके जाना. This kind of scenario, right? Whereas another person is there who is trying to prove with the help of the shastras that Indian shastras they are not in line with child marriage. That child marriage is not supported. Then all of these people, because they are religious, so they will now start thinking that are we being truly religious by doing, let's say, child marriage? So therefore you see acceptability of such a person, right, will be greater, because he is also religious, because he is talking about shastras. We are also religious, right? But he is seeming like an intellectual, and therefore if he can prove that shastras do not allow XYZ, then we need to change, right? So acceptability of the suggested reforms will be higher. Right? So such kind of reformers were more successful compared to first kind of reformers like Young Bengal. Next point. However, for both kind of reformers, logic, reason, rationality, logic, reason, rationality was infallible, was infallible. That is non-negotiable. That is non-negotiable. That is non-negotiable. Therefore, even when they argued, they माने की second type, they के bracket में लिख लो second kind, they के bracket में लिख लो second kinds, first वाली तो बात ही नहीं करेंगे, second kinds. Therefore, even when they argued that Vedas are superior, therefore, even when the second kind of reformers argued that Vedas are superior, comma, in case of clash, between reason, और बार-बार तीनों के लगे, between reason and scriptures, comma, they would support reason. And would argue for reinterpretation, or even change in scriptures. Reinterpretation or even change in scriptures. Right? So therefore, for them, number one point is reason. For example, today, if any, many of the times we see that in TV, etc., some religion-based debate is taking place. Right? Religion is that same religion, one religion, and on one side, one person is talking in favor of something, another person is talking against. Right? But you see, both of them, they are quoting something from that religion, whatever religion is in debate. Right? Both of them, they are focusing. Right? So both of them, they have already decided what is their logical argument or what is their stand. It is only in the second step that they are using religion or they are using the scriptures to find greater support for their viewpoint. Maniki, for them, what is infallible, what is non-negotiable is the stand which they have taken. Right? So therefore, if you are Raja Rammohn Roy and you want sati to be abolished, that is your step number one. Sati is not logical for you, and therefore it should not be there. Now you will study the Shastras, you will study the scriptures to find such shlokas, paragraphs, etc., which are anti-sati. And then you will argue, this is why we should ban sati. Right? Just in case if he is not able to find proof in the scriptures against sati, then फिर वो बागी हो जाएंगे, फिर वो कहेंगे नहीं, फिर ठीक है, फिर तो either we should reinterpret the scriptures, or this practice was there for the ancient times, we are in the modern times, sorry, this cannot be there. माने कि for them logic and reason that is non-negotiable. अगर scriptures support कर देते हैं तो अच्छी बात है, नहीं करते हैं फिर तब भी ठीक है, we'll stick with the things which are logical, reasonable, this kind of scenario, right? So ऐसा है. Will people accept or not? Well, that depends. Obviously, why will they easily accept? There will be sections in the society who do not want change, right? तो है, ठीक है, तो ये है. Next heading right now, print culture. So actually all of these social reformers, early social reformers, that means those social reformers who are there before 1850s, these are basically armchair intellectuals. And these are you guys. All the pre-1850s social reformers, except for Keshav Chandra Sen, these are you guys. You guys माने, just look at yourself. What do you do? सवेरे न्यूज़पेपर पढ़ते हो, दिन में कुछ और पढ़ते हो, रात को कुछ और पढ़ते हो, ठीक? Will you not be a great student if one day you are able to publish an editorial in the, Indian Express or the Hindu, right? So, and your essay writing is what? You are writing basically an editorial. right? So therefore you are arguing your, anything that you do, it is on table, not on the streets, not on the streets. आपका सारा का सारा काम पढ़ाई में और किताबों में है, right? So therefore that is you, right? So you are a moderate, you are a person who is like a moderate kind of person, right? You do not go out on the streets to take data that whether actually inflation has increased or not. भाई आलू क्या भाव दिए, अच्छा पिछले महीने कितने थे, अच्छा उससे पिछले महीने कितने, ये सब काम थोड़ी करते हो आप, पढ़ लेते हो बस किताब में, ठीक? So therefore you are not a person who is there on the street, right? You're not a person who is there on the street, right? So therefore these early social reformers, they used the tool of press. That was their major tool to argue for social reforms. To argue for social reforms. That was their major tool. And it has a very big negative also. And the negative is the common man does not know how to read and write. The common man may not understand the complex, Indian languages, even if you are using, if they are complex, the common man may not be able to understand them. And if you are using English, again, the common man will not be able to understand it. That means who will be reading your newspapers? Your class only. That is, you are also from middle class and the readers are also from middle class, right? And who is middle class? Who is relatively rich? And usually the middle class, the rich class, it was the upper caste. और ये बाद में बहुत बड़ा नेगेटिव साबित होने वाला है, that because of this particular method, because they never sweated it out among the common man, they focused on कि यार पहले उनको कन्विंस करो who are educated, पहले उनको कन्विंस करो who are educated, that is their focus. And therefore अब शास्त्रा बेस्ड डिबेट होनी है तो फिर उसके लिए कलम वगैरह करना होगा, लेंटन लेक्चर्स कैसे लेंगे, सो दिस काइंड ऑफ सिनेरियो. तो ये एक चीज है. सो राइट डाउन, there was push to print culture by British men. There was push to print culture by British men. British men like John Malcolm. British men like John Malcolm. British men like John Malcolm. In brackets GBO, Governor of Bombay. John Malcolm, Governor of Bombay 1827-30. Governor of Bombay 1827-30. Comma, Charles Metcalfe. Charles Metcalfe. CALFE. Charles Metcalfe. In brackets GGI. Charles Metcalfe. In brackets GGI. 1835-36. 1835-36. GGI 1835-36, etc. etc. Full stop. Western educated middle class. Western educated middle class. Also took TOKK, also took to print culture, Like these people are also setting up newspapers, magazines, etc. They also started writing, right? They also started using press, right? Also took to print culture, and therefore there was development of press. Therefore there was development of press and journalism. Therefore there was development of press and journalism in India. Therefore there was development of press and journalism in India. Next paragraph point. Social reformers used press. Social reformers used press as main tool. As main tool. Social reformers used press as main tool for discussing and debating Western sciences. For discussing and debating Western sciences, comma, scriptures, Western sciences, comma, scriptures and social reforms. Western sciences, scriptures and social reforms. Western sciences, scriptures and social reforms. Right? So हमने एक base बना लिया भाई किस what kind of social reformers were there, what was their method also, right? So therefore we have, and what was the reason for the social reforms, we have developed a base. Now let us look at the social ills which are present, right? So therefore in mains exam कुछ ना पता हो तो ये ऐसा उल्टी सा कर देना, ठीक है ना, कुछ भी ना बताओ, ठीक है, ऐसा, because these are like, so write down bracket में स्टार लगा के social ills और social issues, right? Social issues, right? And here you write down a mnemonic: Italian Pastani Prime Minister, Italian Prime Minister in Calcutta, Italian Prime Minister in Calcutta for pre-polls. Imagine that polls are going to take place and Italian Prime Minister has come for campaign. Italian Prime Minister in Calcutta for pre-polls. ऐसा ऐसा कुछ सोच लो, ठीक है, रैंडम, तुम्हें कुछ और बनाना है तो कुछ और बना लो, ठीक. But what is this? So basically, it stands for what you call as idol worship or idolatry. Idol worship is not a problem, but when there is no focus on spiritualism and there is only pure focus on rituals and idol worship, right? So therefore, then it becomes a problem, right? Then it becomes a problem, right? Extra rituals, idol worship or idolatry, right? P, it stands for priestcraft. Priestcraft money, that the priests are there, who are there in the temple, and they are the ones who are dominating the religion, right? For example, you are a poor person and the religious person, the priest, right? The priest, religious person माने कि the priest, ठीक है, religious person तो हर कोई हो सकता है, priest who is there in the temple, right? Since he has monopoly or since he has domination or what is to be done once, let's say, someone dies in the family, right? And let's say he says that until unless you feed 21, you know, people or 21 something, then your father will not, or your, you know, whatever, whoever has died, his soul will not get peace. And you are a very poor man. You do not have that money, right? So therefore you are being economically oppressed, right? You are being economically oppressed. So this priestcraft, right? This thing was criticized, right? That is your P. M is of two kinds. M is basically marriage. And two issues were there of marriage. One was related to child marriage. Another was related to widow remarriage. Widow remarriage. Widow remarriage. So obviously you will oppose the child marriage and you will support the widow remarriage, right? So इसके bracket में positive डाल सकते हैं, right? Then I, it stands for infanticide. Infanticide. Example, female infanticide or any kind of child sacrifice, this kind of scenario, infanticide. C, it stands for casteism. Casteism. And then two P's are there. One is polygamy and another is polytheism. Polygamy and polytheism. Polytheism, a theist, a person who does not believe in religion. तो A लगा दिया उसके सामने, A theist. So theism, it represents like something which is religious. Polytheism, that is belief in multiple gods. This is belief in multiple gods, that there are multiple gods. Believe that all gods not same. Believe that all gods not same. This kind of scenario, that there are multiple gods and हर कोई अलग अलग है. So therefore, for example, it can lead to Shaivites versus Vaishnavites if there is some debate is taking place in the society. Those who are worshippers of Shiva versus those who are worshippers of Vishnu Bhagavan, right? So therefore, this kind of scenario. So basically, this is like the, so you can remember this mnemonic. So usually what happens, we forget one or the other. If we are remembering the mnemonic, then we can probably not forget, right? So this kind of scenario it is there. So first letter of each of these. Hanji. We are talking only about India right now. We are only talking about majority Indian religion पे ऊपर focus है, because utilitarianism also focuses on majoritarianism, right? So 80% of Indians, they were Hindus, right? So therefore the focus of the social religious reforms, it is also primarily there among the Hindus. It is in Muslims, it will be later. For example, Sir Syed Ahmad Khan, he was active in 1870s, 1880s, right? So therefore right now we are in the pre-1857 era, so their main focus it is upon the Hinduism. राइट. सो ये है. सो इसको लिख लो, लिख लिया, राइट. राइट, नाउ राइट डाउन फर्स्ट पॉइंट. वेलेस्ले 9805, वेलेस्ले 9805. नेक्स्ट पॉइंट इंडिपेंडेंट पैराग्राफ पॉइंट है. वेलेस्ले 9805 बैंड चाइल्ड सैक्रिफाइस प्रैक्टिस. वेलेस्ले 9805 banned child sacrifice practice in Sagar Island, in Sagar Island, SAGAR, in Sagar Island of Bay of Bengal, in Sagar Island, in Bay of Bengal, in 1803. Sagar Island, Bay of Bengal, 1803. Sagar Island, Bay of Bengal, 1803. माने कि in some particular island there was this practice, some community might be practicing child sacrifice, so he is ending it. So child sacrifice will be part of infanticide, right? मतलब ऐसा हम सोच लेते हैं उसके लिए. Next write down heading. Next heading write down Henry Vivian Derozio, Henry Vivian Derozio and his young Bengal. Henry Vivian Derozio and his young Bengal. It was active in 1830s. So time wise Brahmo Samaj 1828 पहले आ रहा है, but we are first talking about those who relied only on logic, and then we'll talk about those who relied on logic as well as scriptures, right? Henry Vivian Derozio, HENRY, Henry Vivian Derozio and his young Bengal. Teacher एक बार थोड़ी सी गलती करते हेनरी विवियन डेरोजियो. सबको पता है हेनरी बोला मिस हो गया होगा एन, ठीक है ना, पर हैरी लिख रहा है, हैरी लिख रहा है, हैरी हेनरी जब बोल रहा हूँ हेनरी तो मिस हो गया यार, एन क्या हो गया. लिखो हेनरी विवियन डेरोजियो एंड हिज यंग बंगाल. वेयर इट वाज एक्टिव इन 1830s. नाउ हेनरी विवियन डेरोजियो ही वाज अ यूरेशियन, माने कि मम्मी इंडियन पापा फिरंगी, राइट. ही वाज अ मिक्स्ड प्रोडक्ट, राइट. सो यूरेशियन एंड ही वाज अ यूरेशियन टीचर इन विच कॉलेज? हिंदू कॉलेज. कहाँ पे? इन कैलकाटा. Today the Hindu college Calcutta, it is called Presidency College Calcutta, and it is a very famous college, Presidency College of Calcutta, right. Presidency College of Calcutta was set up by a philanthropist, a British non-official philanthropist, David Hare, right. तो anyways वो सब बाद में देखेंगे. तो philanthropist मतलब जो charity करता है, मतलब he is earning money but he is using that money for charity also. So David Hare, for example, he set up many libraries like Calcutta School Book Society, that books are easily available. He also promoted Western education. He was pro-Indians, and so much that when he died, so the Christian priests, they refused to bury him. So therefore it was his students and his followers that who led a procession and they buried him, right. So good man, right. This kind of scenario. So Henry Vivian Derozio was a professor in Hindu College Calcutta, and he and his students is equal to young Bengal. He and his students, and इस टीचर की क्या आदत थी, राइट. इस टीचर की आदत थी कि ये स्टूडेंट्स को बहुत सोचने के लिए बोलता था. That always keep on thinking, always focus on why, always focus on why, this kind of scenario. मैं हेनरी नहीं हूँ, ठीक है, but otherwise that is question everything. That is question everything, right. Look all around you, question, and therefore these students, they became such a fan of him and they became such followers that in and around their society, in their neighborhood, etc., they started questioning everything, right. So for example, if child marriage is taking place, right, so they will try to go and disrupt child marriage, right. They will try to argue in favor of all of these reforms, anti-priestcraft, anti-idol worship, right. So therefore this kind of scenario it is there, right. So but negative क्या था इनके साथ? The target population was deeply religious, and these people were not at all influenced by religion. They were kind of like atheism. They tried to promote atheism, right. And therefore they will fail. So they became notoriously very famous. For example, they became notoriously famous for having wine, some little, right. And they are saying doctor भी कहता है you should have at least 2 packs a day or 1 pack a day, heart अच्छा रहता है. So this kind of scenario, right. So they're like कि भाई मतलब so what is the harm? I'm not becoming antisocial, I'm not over drunk, right. So as they became notoriously famous, and people looking at them, right, people are looking at them like hey. Right, this kind of scenario. They became notoriously famous for having meat, chicken, right, etc. So therefore they are like कि क्या कर रहे हैं यार यहाँ पे, ठीक है. So the teacher is also becoming badnaam, right? And the students are also becoming badnaam, right? That is, bad name is coming to them, and people like they don't want to talk to them. ठीक है? So उस प्रकार से ना खुद child marriage कर रहे हैं ना दूसरों को होने दे रहे हैं. This kind of scenario, right? So yeah. Plus they also promoted sciences, Western science. हाँ जी. Atheism मतलब they are detached with religion. ये first type वाले हुए. हाँ जी. Right. So yeah. So write down. Derozio was a Eurasian teacher. Derozio was a Eurasian teacher. Derozio was a Eurasian teacher at Hindu College, Calcutta. At Hindu College, comma Calcutta. Eurasian teacher at Hindu College, comma Calcutta. At Hindu College, Calcutta. And he and his students is equal to Young Bengal. And he and his students is equal to Young Bengal. And he and his students is equal to Young Bengal. Next slide. Their primary focus was on using reason. Their primary focus was on using reason slash rationality. वो तीनों यूज कर सकते हैं. Reason slash rationality plus was on using reason slash rationality. अभी तो तुमने कहा था हिंदी में वही चीज लिखवा रहा हूं. Reason slash rationality, comma questioning everything, comma Western sciences, and on atheism, atheism, THEISM, atheism. Atheism माने there is no God, right? Why? Proof लेके आओ. Logical है ना? They'll focus on reason, logic, rationality. So give me physical evidence that there is God. This kind of scenario, right? Therefore they argued for reforms. Therefore they argued for reforms only on basis of doctrine of reason. Only on basis of doctrine of reason. Only on basis of doctrine of reason. And negated, NAGATED, and negated religion. And negated religion. The religion is not important for negated religion. Next point. Derozio instigated माने उकसाना. Instigated. Derozio instigated free thinking. Derozio instigated free thinking among his students. Free thinking among his students. Next point. Among his students. Next point. They intellectually challenged orthodoxy. They intellectually challenged orthodoxy in Hinduism. They intellectually challenged orthodoxy in Hinduism. Intellectually challenged orthodoxy in Hinduism. So please write down in brackets. Who is orthodox? Orthodox is a person who believes in something old, right? Orthodox would say old is gold, right? And doesn't want change. Hanji? A person who believes in feudal things, you can call him orthodox. ऐसा भी हो सकता है, right? So this is nothing but English dictionary, right? Conservative. Conservative is simply a person who does not want change. Who doesn't want change. Who doesn't want change. He might not be believing in something which is old. He might be believing in something which is modern, but he does not want change. Right? So there is a person conservative. कहते हैं give me a conservative estimate. मतलब ज़्यादा नहीं, हल्का हल्का conservative. Right? Conservative. Reformer is a person who wants change. Reformer is a person who wants change. Who wants change. Radical is a person who strongly believes in something. Who strongly, very strongly believes in something. अगर वो रीति रिवाज, हाँ मतलब उसको ऑर्थोडॉक्स कह सकते हैं, राइट, स्पेशली इफ ही इज नॉट वांटिंग. रीति रिवाज मानना इट्स ओके, यू आर बिलीविंग इन योर ट्रेडिशंस, बट व्हेन समवन आर्ग्यूज ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ लॉजिक एंड सजेस्ट्स चेंज and he opposes change even when logic is there, etc., then you can call him that you are orthodox. Orthodox is kind of like a negative term. Orthodox is kind of negative term. So therefore who does not want positive change, ऐसा उसको थोड़ा सा orthodox कहेंगे. नहीं तो जो अच्छे रीति रिवाज में मानता है उसको ट्रेडिशनल कहते हैं, भाई ट्रेडिशनल थिंकिंग है थोड़ी, राइट, तो उसमें नेगेटिव नहीं आता, यू सिंपली से ट्रेडिशनल, राइट. सो समवन हु इज ट्रेडिशनल एंड हु डज नॉट वांट पॉजिटिव चेंज, उसको हम ऑर्थोडॉक्स कह देंगे, राइट, उस प्रकार से ऑर्थोडॉक्स एक्शंस. रेडिकल इज अ पर्सन हु वेरी स्ट्रांगली बिलीव्स इन समथिंग, who very strongly really believes in something, right? So therefore combination is possible. Example, let's say there is a person who is a radical reformer. अच्छा इसमें एक और लिख लेते हैं. अब मैं sorry, right? Let's say there is a person who is let's say gradualism or a gradualist. Gradualist is a person who wants change but hole hole, or you know, who wants things to move slowly. Gradualism, right? So therefore he says move slowly, right? His agenda is piece by piece changes, or nothing should be done immediately, मतलब धीरे धीरे hole hole, right? This kind of scenario, gradualist, right? So therefore you see there can be a person. Example, combination is possible. For example, let's say there is a person who is a radical reformer. There can be a person who is radical but radically orthodox, because radical simply means strong, right? This kind of a scenario it is possible, right? There can be a person who is gradualist reformer. Gradualist reformer, right? Gradualist reformer, this kind of person can be there, right? तो ऐसा शब्द मिक्स हो सकता है, ठीक है. सो फॉर एग्जाम्पल आर्य समाज वॉज अ रेडिकल रिफॉर्मिस्ट ऑर्गेनाइजेशन, राइट, ऐसा हम करके बोल सकते हैं, राइट. तो बेसिकली इस तरीके से हम वर्ड यूज करेंगे. ये जितने भी अर्ली सोशल रिफॉर्मर्स थे, ठीक है, तो वो मोस्टली आपके ग्रेजुएट रिफॉर्मर्स थे, राइट. सो ये है. अब नाउ राइट डाउन. like RRR, नेक्स्ट इंडिपेंडेंट पॉइंट है ऑफिशियल. लाइक RRR, यंग बंगाल का सब पॉइंट यही है. लाइक RRR इन ब्रैकेट्स राजा राम मोहन रॉय, लाइक RRR राजा इन ब्रैकेट्स राजा राम मोहन रॉय. अब इतना लंबा नाम कौन लिखेगा नोट्स में, हम RRR लिखेंगे, राजा राम मोहन रॉय, ठीक है. आप एग्जाम में रॉय लिख लेना, ठीक है ना. तो राजा राम मोहन रॉय, लाइक RRR, कॉमा द यंग बंगाल also demanded dash trial by jury, comma separation of powers, trial by jury, comma separation of powers, comma Indianization of civil services, Indianization of CS, trial by jury, separation of powers, Indianization of CS, Indianization of CS, and freedom of press, Indianization of CS and freedom of press. In brackets ताला लगा के demands outside social reforms. Demands outside social reforms. So these are their demands which are not part of social reforms. They are kind of political, right? So therefore, it can, this sentence can form like our conclusion if any question comes on Young Bengal, right? Right? तो मतलब एक social organization उसका थोड़ा सा delta mention कर दिया हमने, outside social reforms भी एक line mention कर दी. So it gives you multiple, you know, perspective, right? Next point, they set up Society for Acquisition of GK, general knowledge. They set up Society for Acquisition of GK. GK माने greater class नहीं, general knowledge. GK, general knowledge. GK तो पता है, Society for General Knowledge. Society for General Knowledge. 1838. Where they debated discussed Western sciences, and social reforms. Next line, result is equal to failed because, result is equal to failed because could not develop any mass movement, for social reforms. Failed because could not develop any mass movement for social reforms. Due to their total faith in logic, reason, rationality. Due to their total faith in logic, reason, rationality. And no regard for religion. While the target audience, while the target population, and no regard for religion, while the target population was deeply religious. Full stop. Therefore got alienated. Alien माने जो हमारा नहीं है, कुछ अलग सा है ना, alienated. Therefore got alienated from masses. Masses से बात नहीं करना सारे. Therefore got alienated from masses. Full stop. However became famous. तो फिर हम पढ़ क्यों रहे हैं? ठीक है, because they became famous in the negative sense, right? However became famous due to their radical ideas. Mane they wanted radical changes, है ना, due to their radical ideas, right? ब्रैकेट में स्टार लगा के fun fact became notorious for eating non-veg, and whining. Eating non-veg and whining. डिरोजियो के पापा फिरंगी थे, दे देते होंगे थोड़ा सा, ब्रांडी ले लो, ठंड लग रही है, ब्रांडी ले लो. ठीक है. So we'll meet after 10 minutes and then we'll discuss Raja Rammohn Roy and his Brahmo Samaj. ठीक है. नहीं, हम सिर्फ उसकी बात कर रहे थे. वो तो हमने लाइक राजा राममोहन रॉय, वो तो वैसे ही बोल दिया हमने, ताकि एक हाईलाइट करने के लिए, ताकि वो चीज मुझे राजा राममोहन रॉय में ना निकलवानी पड़े. Right, so the next person that we discuss is Raja Rammohn Roy. And Raja Rammohn Roy, he set up an organization called Brahmo Samaj, which is also known as Brahmo Sabha, right? And it had certain beliefs, which we'll come to know when we discuss Raja Rammohn Roy. So whatever he is believing in, so therefore that organization will also believe in that, right? In future, that we will see that people like Debindranath Tagore, right? So Debindranath Tagore, so Dwarka Deb Rabindra, ऐसा आप न्यूमोनिक बना सकते हो. द्वारकानाथ टैगोर वन जनरेशन, नेक्स्ट जनरेशन देवेंद्रनाथ टैगोर, थर्ड जनरेशन रविंद्रनाथ टैगोर, राइट. तो एनीवेज देवेंद्रनाथ टैगोर, केशव चंद्र सेन, दीज आर द पीपल फ्रॉम दिस ऑर्गेनाइजेशन, फेमस नेम्स, राइट. तो ये है रिगार्डिंग योर राजा राममोहन रॉय. सो हिज प्राइमरी प्रोजेक्ट वाज अबॉलिशन ऑफ सती, राइट. So maybe we have discussed this earlier, but in the ancient times sati was practiced, right, but it was a form of spiritual practice, right. Discuss किया हमने पहले, ठीक है. Form of spiritual practice in the sense that मतलब the Indian spiritual gurus, they say that women, they have been able to achieve the Brahman experience, or they are able to achieve that closeness with God on the basis of love, right, and men have not been capable of that. So therefore, most of the men that you see, they are sannyasis, whereas in the case of women, you see examples like Meera, right. So therefore, love or bhakti, this kind of scenario. So therefore, in the old times or in the ancient times, so if the wife is able to so much associate with the soul of the husband that when he dies, she does not have any desire to live. Right, for her, the path of spiritualism is no more there, right. So therefore, if she voluntarily, because of reasons of spiritualism, right, if she voluntarily, gives up her life, right, and symbolically burns alive, right, very painful experience, but symbolically burns alive, in the pyre, right. Although such things are also there. For example, in Vietnam, when Vietnam War was taking place, so a Buddhist monk was there. He set himself on fire alive, and he did not scream at all. He felt no pain, right. So therefore, that kind of thing can also be achieved through spiritualism. Anyways, right. So therefore, that was the ancient practice. But every person who has any knowledge of Hinduism, be it Aurobindo Ghosh or be it Swami Vivekananda, right, or be it Raja Rammohn Roy, all of them, they agreed that now decay has taken place, degradation has taken place, and now sati is basically a social evil, right. Osho also, for example, criticizes sati as a social evil, but in the ancient times it was different. So when does it become a social evil? It becomes a social evil, for example, let's say family members, right. If there is no child and the family members, they do not want to share property with the widow, they do not want to share any house with the widow. So therefore, they forcing because of greed of property, forcing the widow to become a sati, then it is nothing but a murder. It has no connection with any spiritualism, right. Similarly, for example, if the family is forcing the widow to die or to commit kind of like suicide, right, so because of social image of the family, so therefore this is also nothing but murder, right. And such situation used to be there by the time period of 1800s, that women were forcefully made to become sati, right. So it is nothing but proper murder in 1800s, right, not in the ancient times, in the 1800s, right. Another aspect was there, for example, even if the woman voluntarily becomes a sati, but the reason for that is not spiritualism, the reason for that is her is her respect in society, that see, I became sati and therefore the world should remember me as a good wife, as a loyal wife. So that the stereotype that ideal wife aisi honi chahiye who does sati, that is justified in my case. Even that is also far, far away from any kind of spiritualism. That means not just outside pressure, but also any kind of inside, thing which is not related to spiritualism, but related to getting some kind of acceptance from the society, or preserving your own, this thing name that I became a sati, so that the world will remember me as a loyal wife, So therefore, even that is totally detached from spiritualism. And therefore, then there is no, sanction, no support for sati. Even if at an individual level you are doing it not because of spiritualism, but because of any other kind of feeling, right? Then, or any other kind of feeling like preserving my dignity, preserving my respect, then it is totally a suicide. Then it is not any kind of spiritualism. And no religion would obviously support suicide. No religion would obviously support suicide. This kind of scenario. For example, such yogas are there. I was watching some, such yogas are there. If you do that yoga in 1 hour or something, you will die. Such yogas are also there. Right? So therefore, such spiritual people have been there who commit this ki ab ho gaya, bahut ho gaya. Right? In Jainism, for example, there is this thing that once you achieve that kind of spirituality, so after that you leave food. Huh? Right? So therefore, this kind of scenario. तो मतलब ये different उसमें तो ये है. But in the modern times, it had become degenerated, it had become decayed. Right? And be it Aurobindo, be it Raja Raman Roy, be it Swami Vivekananda, everyone criticized sati like they criticized the system of caste. Right? So therefore, that is the idea. Right? And in his personal life, his bhabi or his sister-in-law, when he was away, she was made a sati. And then he became mad against sati. Initially, he started going to the ghats where sati was taking place, and he would remove the chitta, right, and he would enter into fights. But later on, he realized that there needs to be some kind of systematic change, and therefore he started lobbying the Britishers that you should bring a law for sati abolition. Right? The Britishers, they did not want to, although Orientalism has ended, but there is political domain, there is economic domain, and then there is social domain. In the social domain, this person, William Bentinck, 1828 to 1835, this person was an Orientalist only in the social domain. And therefore, he gave a condition to Raja Ram Mohan Roy that if you are able to prove it to me that sati is not supported by the Indian Shastras, fine, then I will bring a law. So therefore, in the domain of society, I will rule India the Indian way. Such was the personality of William Bentinck. Right? Also, there were orthodox organizations who did not want change. For example, Dharma Sabha of Radha Kanta Dev. Right? So therefore, now a scripture-based debate started. Raja Raman Roy would also enter into verbal discussions and verbal debates. Right? First he will speak, then Dharma Sabha representatives will speak. He will also write articles, right, mentioning the different elements, the different texts of the Indian scripture that see sati is murder. And ultimately, he was able to prove that sati is murder as per every shastra. The way in which it is taking place, it is nothing but pure murder. And when he was able to prove, in 1829, the Britishers, they brought a law and they abolished sati by law. And therefore, the practice of sati, it came down. But the practice of sati, it came down. Why? Because it was otherwise also not a very prevalent practice. It was not that in every house sati is taking place. Even in the upper caste, it was not that in every house sati is taking place. Plus, there were different conditions also. For example, if any child is there, then sati is not going to take place. This kind of scenario. So, it was practiced, but not at a very large scale. And therefore, ending of sati was also easy. Relatively easier. कोई problem बड़ी नहीं है, तो खत्म भी ज़्यादा आसानी से हो जाएगी. So, it was not a very big problem also from the scale level. At the scale level, that how many satis are taking place, at that level, it was not a very spread out kind of problem. Right? So therefore, this was his achievement, abolition of sati. He died in 1833. But before that, he also convinced the Britishers to introduce Western education. And Macaulay's Minute on Education, which is coming 2 years after death of Raja Ram Mohan Roy, right? It was influenced by the ideas or the campaign led by Raja Ram Mohan Roy, because he was for him, what is infallible? Vedas are superior, but what is infallible, what is non-negotiable? Logic, rationality, reason. Right? So he supported Western education. So he's like, in the domain of religion, Vedas are great, but in the domain of society, in the domain of sciences, education, etc., there we should move towards modern studies, so that India can also become a modern economy and a modern society. So inside the doors, fine. Vedas are superior. So therefore, I am a person who is deeply religious. But in the public domain, the government should spend money not on teaching Vedas, but it should spend money on, for example, physics, chemistry, maths, Western philosophies, etc. So that the society moves into some kind of a, like Western culture at least, right? So religiously you remain, this thing. So that is there. Although there is also controversy theory that he converted to Christianity later on, right? हाँ, later on he converted to Christianity. Something कुछ ऐसा था. But mainstream books में इसका जिक्र नहीं होता, right? So that is what is there, right? So please write down. Heading is RRR and his Brahmo Samaj 1828 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 and his Brahmo Samaj 1828. Write down. Roy RRR लिख लो, जो RRR called father of modern India. RRR called father of modern India. RRR called father of modern India. Next point. A student and scholar of Vedas, comma Christianity, Vedas, comma Christianity, comma Persian and Sanskrit literature, Persian and Sanskrit literature, Persian and Sanskrit literature, Persian and Sanskrit literature. Next point. He came to believe that Vedas are superior. He came to believe that Vedas are superior. Vedas are superior. And support doctrine of reason. Next point. RRR believed that social reforms not possible. RRR believed that social reforms not possible. पीछे वाला AC देख लो, लोग कह रहे हैं ठंड लग रही है. RRR believed that social reforms not possible. Social reforms not possible. बंद मतलब टेम्परेचर 1-2 डिग्री बढ़वा दो. Without religious reforms. As many social practices were rooted in religion. Many social practices were rooted in religion. And high importance of religion in Indian social life. High importance of religion in Indian social life. Next point. RRR was against other worldliness. RRR was against other worldliness. Linness. L-I-N-E-S-S. Worldliness. Other worldliness. ब्राइम में स्टार लगा के हेवन हेल है ना, अदर वर्ल्ड, स्वर्ग नरक, ब्रैकेट्स क्लोज्ड, प्लस अगेंस्ट डॉक्ट्राइन ऑफ कर्मा, in brackets that is acts of past life acts of past life determining acts of past life determining present life. Acts of past life determining present life. Acts of past life determining present life. ठीक, plus against doctrine of incarnation. Against doctrine of incarnation. Against doctrine of incarnation. INCARNATION, incarnation. In brackets, that is God's human birth. That is God's human birth. God's human birth. God's human birth. God's human birth. However, God's human birth. However, BS 1828, Brahmo Samaj 1828, BS 1828 took no definitive stand. Took no definitive stand. BS 1828 took no definitive stand. Took no definitive stand regarding karma and transmigration. Regarding karma and transmigration of soul. Transmigration of soul. In brackets ताला लगा के rebirth. Rebirth. Brackets closed. Transmigration of soul. Rebirth. And left the belief to individual Brahmo Samajist. Left the belief to individual Brahmo Samajist. Left the belief to individual Brahmo Samajist. So माने कि Raja Raman Roy did not believe in transmigration, that is rebirth, past life, etc., etc. But as an organization, Brahmo Samaj, it did not take any strong stand against them. Why? Because there were some positives also, right? ब्रैकेट में मतलब कॉमन सेंस से मैं डिराइव कर रहा हूँ. सो ब्रैकेट में स्टार लगा के लिखिए. ब्रैकेट में स्टार लगा के लिखिए. positives example, positives example, good deeds in present life, good deeds, good karma, good deeds in present life for better next life, plus removal of fear of death due to next birth, removal of fear of death due to next birth, brackets close. माना कि this idea is close to spiritualism कि fine, this is just a body, soul will be there, soul अजर है, अमर है, right? This kind of scenario. So उन्होंने कहा कि and brackets काट दो, plus these two among core beliefs of Hinduism, therefore prevent alienation from masses, brackets closed, therefore prevent alienation from masses, brackets closed, right? So these are like atma ajar hai, amar hai, you know, so this is like very core fundamental aspect of Hindu philosophy, right? So therefore if you are taking a strong stand against this, then you know maybe Hindus, they will not get attracted, they will not be totally in agreement, right? Because now you are challenging the core beliefs also, which also have some positives, right? तो इस वजह से as an organization they left the belief to the individual Brahmo Samaj, but चल ठीक है, जो तुम्हें मानना तुम मान लो, कोई दिक्कत नहीं, right? In these aspects, right? हाँ वही मतलब good deeds in present life, right, will lead to good things either in present life or in next life. So therefore that kind of scenario. Next point. Next point. His response to British criticism, his response to British criticism was to go back. His response to British criticism was to go back to pure past of Vedas. Was to go back to pure past of Vedas. That is ideal social life. That is ideal social life. That is ideal social life. Therefore agreed that there is degeneration. Therefore agreed that there is degeneration in present times. Therefore agreed that there is degeneration. कुछ चीज सड़ जाना, डिके हो जाना, डिके, degeneration in present times. माने कि ideal social life prescribed by Hinduism was not this Italian Prime Minister in Calcutta for peoples. Right? So हाँ degeneration हुआ है, decay हुआ है, viruses आ गए हैं. He agreed. But ancient past was great, and we will go to ancient past by doing social reforms. So that is the idea. But also argued in favor of glorious ancient past. But also argued in favor of glorious ancient past. But also argued in favor of glorious ancient past. Next line. However, for him, rationality was infallible. However, for him, rationality was infallible and not Vedas. However, for him, rationality was infallible. infallible. Rationality was infallible, not Vedas. Not Vedas. मानी Vedas अच्छे हैं, बहुत ज़्यादा अच्छे हैं, but number one for me is logic. Right? So if logic is not supported by any particular element of the Vedas, then we either need to reinterpret it, or we need to then not follow it, because logic is supreme. Right? So that is. Next point. Wanted Western education. Wanted Western education. Wanted Western education and Western sciences. Wanted Western education and Western sciences instead of Indian education. Instead of Indian education. Instead of Indian education. As for him, only Western education. As for him, only Western education. As for him, only Western education could modernize India. Only Western education could modernize India. Only Western education could modernize India. In brackets डाला करके, that is Indian polity economy. That is Indian polity economy. Society. Indian polity economy society. Bracket is closed. A student can think कि सर एक तो ये कह रहे कि भी Western education can modernize Indian society also. And then in the domain of society, religion is also important. There he is saying Vedas are superior. So is it not conflict? Is it not conflict? That it is, he is promoting Western culture. Is it not conflict? So basically the idea there is that he wants people to be like him. Like him mane, I have studied Western education, which is why I know why logic, reason, rationality, they are right things. But yes, that does not mean, being logical does not mean being anti-Vedas. Being rational does not mean that I forget my cultural roots. Right? So fine. जैसा मैं हूं. I also believe in logic, reason, rationality, but do not I also support Vedas? I do. मैं तो कह रहा हूं Vedas are supreme, they are superior. I have studied everything, Persian literature पढ़ लिया, right, संस्कृत literature पढ़ लिया, Christianity पढ़ लिया, Vedas पढ़ लिया, and as per me Vedas are superior. ठीक, मतलब they are good enough. मतलब Hindus they do not need to convert to something else. उनको इन कॉन्फिडेंस नहीं फील होना चाहिए. They should not feel inferiority complex at all. Vedas are great, right? So therefore that is the thing. So it is not in conflict, right? So again I say, whenever you study Radha Ramohan Ray, Swami Vivekananda, so therefore try to think a person who is a scientist, ISRO scientist, but also before launching the rocket, he is also doing a puja, right? So therefore that kind of scientist, right? So उस प्रकार से that personally in that domain, religion वाला domain में Vedas are great, but in other aspects of life, logic, reason, Western logic, etc., that is great, right? तो है next point. Example opposed setting up of Sanskrit college. Example opposed setting up of Sanskrit college. In Calcutta in 1824. In Calcutta in 1824. By government. In Calcutta in 1824 by government. Right? So he himself is also setting up colleges which are teaching Vedas. He is saying कि वो personal expenditure से let the expenditure take place. If someone wants to study Veda, we are as a community we will do some private efforts. But public money, taxpayer money, it should be spent on Western education. So bracket में स्टार लगा लिखिए. Wanted taxpayer money to be spent on Western education. Wanted taxpayer money to be spent on Western education. Brackets closed. Wanted taxpayer money to be spent on Western education. Brackets closed. Right? Brackets closed. हाँ जी, नहीं वो ड्रेन थ्योरी भी आई नहीं है ना, इसलिए ड्रेन थ्योरी भी आई नहीं है. प्लस जो पैसा ब्रिटेन नहीं जा रहा, द मनी विच इज नॉट गोइंग टू ब्रिटेन बट इट इज बीइंग स्पेंट इन इंडिया, एटलीस्ट दैट मनी शुड बी स्पेंट ऑन एज पर हिम ऑन द वेस्टर्न एजुकेशन. प्लस his ideas and efforts influenced, decision in favor of Western education in English language. Decision in favor of Western education in English language. His ideas and efforts influenced decision in favor of Western education in English language. Western education in English language by Macaulay's Minute on Education 1835. By Macaulay. Macaulay's Macaulay. Macaulay's Minute on Education 1835. 1835. That became main policy document. For education. That became main policy document for education in India. That became main policy document for education in India. Next point. For achieving social reforms, he set up BS 1828. For achieving social reforms, he set up BS 1828. BS 1828. Right? BS 1828. Next point. BS 1828. BS Brahmo Samaj 1828, 1828. BS 1828 worked against idolatry, priestcraft, idolatry, comma priestcraft, idolatry, comma priestcraft, comma क्या था इटालियन प्राइम मिनिस्टर एम एम नहीं टच करेंगे. Why? Because he's a gradualist reformer and issue of child marriage, issues related to women at this point of time are considered very radical issues. अभी तो बस स्टार्ट हुआ है, इट इज वेरी टफ थिंग, सो उसके खिलाफ काम नहीं करेंगे. ठीक है, सो ठीक है, तो इन्फेंटिसाइड वो तो इन जनरल रहेगा. प्रीस्टार्ट कॉमा सती एंड पॉलीथीज्म, कॉमा सती एंड पॉलीथीज्म, कॉमा सती एंड पॉलीथीज्म, POLYTHEISM, सती एंड पॉलीथीज्म. माने काम यहां किया, ठीक है, बट लिप सर्विस बाकियों के बारे में भी ही विल डू. सो राइट डाउन नेक्स्ट पॉइंट. RRR argued that caste divides, RRR argued that caste divides, which is why modern nationalism and sense of unity, modern nationalism and sense of unity lacking among Indians. Modern nationalism and sense of unity lacking among Indians. Lacking among Indians. ठीक? Why? Because liberty, equality, fraternity, French Revolution 1789, modern nationalism, remember 1857 revolt, right? उसमें हमने criteria use किया था नहीं किया? यार भूल गए. So modern nationalism, it is based on, it is a product of French Revolution. That is the modern nationalism idea. That nation is summation of people who feel one, and liberty to the masses plus equality, that is on the basis of birth or anything, there should not be any special privileges to anyone, and fraternity, money, unity. That is, you are French first and then anything else, right? Nation first, French first, right? So because caste divides Hindus into upper castes, middle castes, lower castes, and therefore this, for example, intercaste marriages, they also do not take place, right? Physical interaction, social interaction, it is also this thing, right? So as a result, caste is dividing the Hindu society. So anything which is division is opposite of unity, right? That means fraternity element, it is not there. So therefore caste is a reason for, caste based divisions is a reason for lack of unity among Indians. This is what he is saying. Caste based divisions is a reason for lack of unity among Indians, right? Next point. RRR used Upanishads. RRR used Upanishads. Used Upanishads. Upanishads. That is, translated them to Bangla and translated them to Bangla. Used Upanishads and translated them to Bangla. Used Upanishads and translated them to Bangla. Dash to prove that Hinduism favors, monotheism. To prove that Hinduism favors monotheism. To prove that Hinduism favors monotheism. Monotheism. In brackets star लगा के, that is there is only one God. That is, there is only one God within Hinduism. That is, there is only one God within Hinduism. Brackets closed. That is, there is only one God within Hinduism. Brackets closed. And universalism. And universalism. And universalism. Brackets star लगा के, that is, Hindu God is equal to Christian God is equal to Islamic God, etc. Hindu God is equal to Christian God is equal to Islamic God, etc. Brackets close. Right. मतलब गॉड इज वन, ठीक है, तो उस प्रकार से यू कैन राइट डाउन, ठीक है ना। तो मतलब ए मोनोथीज्म इट मींस दैट विद इन हिंदुइज्म देयर आर नो सेपरेट गॉड्स, ठीक है, एवरी गॉड मतलब ऑल गॉड्स आर सेम, वन सिंगल गॉड इज देयर, राइट। सो दिस इज अबाउट हिंदुइज्म. What about the God which Hinduism says that this is God and this is a path to reach God? What about other religions? So universalism, global approach, that is between religions also all gods are same. So within Hinduism there is one God, and even between religions there is only one God. Some are calling them Allah, some are calling them Bhagwan, some are calling them God. Right? So therefore otherwise everything it is same. So monotheism, universalism, right? So and he is using Upanishads obviously because there is focus on use of scriptures. Therefore there is only one God. Therefore there is only one God. Therefore there is only one God. Next point, RRR, RRR एग्जाम में रॉय भी लिख सकते हैं. आरआरआर टुक हेल्प ऑफ, आरआरआर टुक हेल्प ऑफ ब्रिटिश अथॉरिटी, आरआरआर टुक हेल्प ऑफ ब्रिटिश अथॉरिटी, दैट इज लेजिस्लेटिव, एग्जीक्यूटिव, जुडिशियल अथॉरिटी, दैट इज लेजिस्लेटिव, एग्जीक्यूटिव, जुडिशियल अथॉरिटी ऑफ ब्रिटिश, of British, and of British personalities, and of British personalities for his social reforms, and British personalities for his social reforms, and British personalities for his social reforms, for his social reforms. Example, example, worked with, example, worked with William Bentinck, example, worked with William Bentinck 2835, example, worked with William Bentinck 2835 for abolition of sati, for abolition of sati, for abolition of sati, for abolition of sati. Next heading, write down sati. First subpoint, reason is equal to, reason is equal to greed of relatives, greed of relatives, greed of relatives, lalach, greed of relatives was primary reason, greed of relatives was primary reason, as they didn't want to share property, as they didn't want to share property with widow, as they didn't want to share property with widow, as they didn't want to share property with widow. Plus stereotype of ideal wife, plus stereotype of ideal wife, stereo, music stereo, type, stereotype, STEREO, stereotype of ideal wife, पतिव्रता पत्नी, ideal wife, ideal wife, full stop. Next point, sati was not a widespread phenomenon, sati was not a widespread phenomenon. Reason हो गए, ये दो reason है. Sati was not a widespread phenomenon, sati was not a widespread phenomenon, PHENO, Menon, Mr. Menon, phenomenon, widespread phenomenon, and existed and existed mainly in Bengal, and existed mainly in Bengal among upper castes, existed mainly in Bengal among upper castes. among upper castes. In brackets chala lगा के earlier in Vijayanagar Empire, 1336-1646, earlier in Vijayanagar Empire, 1336-1646, earlier in Vijayanagar Empire, 1336-1646, plus in Rajputana, as Johar, plus in Rajputana as Johar, J-O, Karan Johar, J-O-H-A-R, as Johar, but for different reasons. But for different reasons. But for different reason. But for different reasons. That is chastity. ये बोलते ना इतनी ज़्यादा अंग्रेजी / dignity. अरे वो स्पेलिंग सर्च कर रहा है, यही होता ना, डिग्निटी को चेस्टिटी बोलते हैं. खोल ना फोन, बाकी तो पता नहीं क्या क्या देखते रहे तो क्लास के बीच में. लगाओ. अरे लगाओ ना, ये सर्च करो जो लिखा मैंने, यही कहते हैं ना. इतनी अंग्रेजी अच्छी नहीं है हमारी. यही कहते हैं चेस्टिटी / डिग्निटी. थोड़ी सीखी है. चेस्टिटी / डिग्निटी. Right? Full stop. So, for example, invaders, for example, or some, so therefore, to prevent rapes or to prevent these kind of scenario, so इसलिए जोहर किया जाता है, not for greed of relatives or not for these relatives. Right? So brackets closed. Brackets closed. In 1800s, it began to be practiced even among lower castes. In 1800s, it began to be practiced even among lower castes in Bengal. It began to be practiced even among lower castes in Bengal. Due to desire for social mobility. 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 That is for better status for one's caste. That is for better status for one's caste in caste hierarchy. That is for better status for one's caste in caste hierarchy. Better status for one's caste in caste hierarchy. In caste hierarchy. Right? So how do you decide that a particular caste is at which level in the caste hierarchy? Whether it is a upper caste, a middle caste or a lower caste. By emulating the behaviors and the practices of the upper castes. So therefore, my caste is now equal to the upper caste, because see, whatever they are doing religion wise, we are also doing religion wise or social wise. That is why even today at times such reports come that in those small pockets where casteism is still very high, that if some person from the lower caste wanted to ride on a horse in his barat or in his wedding, so social clashes take place, that how dare you can sit on a घोड़ी in your शादी. भाई वो अपनी शादी में चाहे वो घोड़े पे बैठे चाहे घोड़े पे खड़ा होकर नाचे, तुम्हारे पिताजी कहे जा रहा है, जान दो उसको. ठीक है. Some people they also oppose barat. You are from, for example, lower caste, how dare you can have barat. और फिर क्या तू निकालेगा? जिसकी शादी वही तो निकालेगा बारात. ठीक है, तो निकालने दो भाई उनको, तुम्हें क्या, तुम्हारा क्या जा रहा है? This kind of scenario, right? So ऐसा social clash ऐसा, right? Because the upper caste they do not want same status for the lower caste. They want to maintain their supremacy. This kind of scenario, right? So because the upper caste they are following sati. In fact, this was a negative. The upper caste they were not doing widow remarriage. Whereas lower caste, they were doing widow remarriage. But later on, when the issue of widow remarriage became extra famous, so lower castes, they also stopped doing widow remarriage. And here also, because the upper caste, they were doing sati, therefore the lower caste in 1800s, they also started doing somewhat sati. right? So therefore this is a negative. Next point. हाँ जी, आदमी सती नहीं होता, आदमी सत्तू पी लेता, सती नहीं होता. I told you already that in the ancient times when sati was not a murder, when sati was not a suicide or it was not a murder, right? Murder is done by someone else, suicide is done by one else. Suicide can never be part of, the word suicide cannot be part of spiritualism, right? So when sati was not a, this is Sanskritization only, right? This is called Sanskritization, जो मैंने अभी आपको लिखवाया. So, जो मैंने भी आपको लिखा उसको संस्कृताइजेशन में कहते हैं. That is trying to copy the practices of the upper caste to have a better status for one's caste, right? As I told you, when sati was not a suicide or a murder, at that particular point of time, this thing was achieved by women. That is, the आदमी तो सन्यासी बनता था भगवान की प्राप्ति के लिए, but with respect to women, this thing was there that through the path of love towards God or through the path of love towards the soulmate husband, right, you can achieve spiritualism, right? So women are considered more upgraded version of spirituals, right? मतलब more stronger उस प्रकार से, right? So इसलिए आदमी सता नहीं होगा, ठीक? Next point, missionaries. Actually, if you look at the word sati, its origin is also sat, right, which is something satsang, sat, you see. So its origin, it is good origin or spiritual. Later it is either suicide or murder, right? So next I know missionaries, Christian missionaries. Next point है भाई, heading होगी तो लिखाऊंगा ना. Next point बोला है, missionaries opposed sati but failed. Missionaries opposed sati but failed. Missionaries opposed sati but failed. Therefore, main role of Roy in sati abolition. Therefore, main role of Roy in sati abolition by 1829. Main role of Roy in sati abolition by 1829. Next point, scripture based debates. Scriptures माने शास्त्रास और texts, scriptures, religious texts. Scriptures based debates took place between reformist BS 1828. Scriptures based debate took place between reformist BS 1828 and orthodox sections led by Dharma Sabha, of Radha Kanta Deb. Radha is another example where through the path of love, spiritualism it is attained, right? Radha Kanta Deb. Dharma Sabha of Radha Kanta Deb. It is, we know what is orthodox, those who do not want change. Reformist we know, those who want change, right? Radha Kanta Deb. वो एक मीम आजकल चलता है ना जिसमें वो मोहब्बतें मूवी वाला अमिताभ बच्चन वो कहता है प्रतिष्ठा, सम्मान, अनुशासन, राइट? तो राधाकांता देव आप वैसा मतलब अभी इस एटलीस्ट इन सती मोड ही इज दैट अमिताभ बच्चन, ऑर्थोडॉक्स, रिलेटिवली ऑर्थोडॉक्स. नेक्स्ट पॉइंट, अब ऐसा राजा राम मोहन राय वो नहीं है शाहरुख खान, ऐसा नहीं. नेक्स्ट पॉइंट, बेंटिक 2835. Bentic 2835, BENTICK, Bentic 2835. So he is the first Governor General of India, if you remember. He became first GGI in 1833. Before 1833, he is Governor General of Bengal. From 1833, he is Governor General of India. So Bentinck 2835 made it a precondition for abolishing sati by law, made it a precondition for abolishing sati by law, made it a precondition for abolishing sati by law, that it be proven that sati is not in line with scriptures. Sati is not in line with scriptures. माने scriptures they do not prescribe sati. ऐसा तुम prove कर दो तो मैं कर दूंगा. Right? So this is Orientalism in social domain in operation. Right? So bracket में स्टार लगा लिखिए. Notice Orientalism of Bentinck. Notice Orientalism of Bentinck 2835. Brackets closed. Notice Orientalism of Bentinck 2835. Brackets closed. So he is saying, in the social domain, I am going to rule India the India way. So you prove to me that India way is not sati. I'll ban sati. As simple as that. Right? Roy proved that sati was murder as per every shastra. Roy proved that sati is murder as per every shastra. Roy proved that sati is murder as per every shastra. Full stop. Every shastra. Full stop. Sati Abolition Act 1829. Sati Abolition Act 1829. नहीं हो गया बस खत्म. मतलब sati was abolished in 1829. तो Sati Abolition Act 1829. Sati Abolition Act 1829. स्माइली बना लो. ठीक. नेक्स्ट हेडिंग राइट डाउन ब्रह्मो समाज. अब थोड़ा सा ऑर्गेनाइजेशन के बारे में बात कर लेते हैं. ब्रह्मो समाज 1828. ब्रह्मो समाज 1828. So within the Brahmo Samaj, we have already discussed the personality of Raja Ram Mohan Roy. Now we will be focusing on DBT, Direct Benefit Transfer, nahi, Devendranath Tagore, DBT, Devendranath Tagore, and KCS, that is your Keshav Chandra Sen, right? तो इनके बीच में क्या है? So Devendranath Tagore is a gradualist reformer. Devendranath Tagore is a gradualist reformer, right? Reformer. He is not radical, right? So radical is a person who very strongly believes in something. So he is not a radical reformer. He is a gradualist reformer, right? So for example, whereas KCS is opposite. KCS is opposite. For example, Devendranath Tagore would not advocate break from Hinduism, right? Or Devendranath Tagore would say कि यार women related issues and caste related issues, they are very sensitive, and therefore if we start talking against casteism too much, and if we start talking in favor of widow marriage and against child marriage too much, too aggressively, then Hindus they will हमसे छिटक जाएंगे, they will become alienated from us, and support base of Brahmo Samaj will come down, right? Because then we are talking about something which is pinching, the Hindu society, let's say, or it is pinching the upper caste. And who is our support base right now? It is only upper caste, because our method is of press. हम कहीं जनता के बीच में तो जाते नहीं. We do not go to the people. Our method is press, etc. So therefore, our audience right now is upper caste. And if we start preaching against casteism, if we start preaching against child marriage and in favor of widow marriage, right? So therefore, the upper caste will get angry, and support base of Brahmo Samaj will come down, right? Second thing, ठीक है, तो देखिए. अब now what is the personality of Keshav Chandra Sen? Keshav Chandra Sen was a radical reformer. For example, he is like you. Why you should not talk about caste? In fact, I am going to question that in the Brahmo Samaj, why there are no people from the lower caste? Right? ये न्यूज़पेपर क्या होता है? Writing articles in newspaper. We should go to the ground. And why are you only limited to Calcutta? Go outside Calcutta. There is this problem. Italian Prime Minister in Calcutta for pre-polls. All of these problems are there. right? So go outside Calcutta. Why just outside Calcutta? Go outside Bengal. जमीन पे जाओ, लोगों से बात करो, talk to them. ये क्या बस you're writing articles. How many people are reading your articles? Is a poor man reading article? Does he even know how to read and write? फालतू बकवास कर रहे हो. Real social change will take place by going to the masses, right? And देखो सीधी सी बात है. If you are saying that this, Hindu छिटक जाए, छिटकने दो, कोई नहीं. We'll start a new religion called Brahmoism, and people can convert from Hinduism to Brahmoism. So for DBT, Brahmoism is not a new religion. It is a better form of Hinduism, right? But for Keshav Chandra Sen, he's asking people to convert. He's asking people to convert from Hinduism to Brahmoism. That's fine. If there is no solution available, agar aap, to fine, we'll start a new religion, which will have all the things common with Hinduism, just that the social ills will not be present. Caste will not be present, right? Widow marriage will be allowed, child marriage will not be present, this kind of scenario, right? So Keshav Chandra Sen is more aggressive. Keshav Chandra Sen is more aggressive, right? So ये इनके बीच में differences इतने बढ़ जाएंगे that by 1866 Brahmo Samaj will break because of personality and organizational and method differences, method based differences. करना क्या है, whether to go on to the ground or keep on writing articles. Goal क्या है, whether caste and women related issues, they are a goal or they are not a goal. On these differences, तेजी से चलना है radical reformers या धीरे धीरे चलना है, walk करना है या sprint मारना है. On these issues, the differences they lead to break in Brahmo Samaj, and DBT forms, Devendra Tagore forms Adi Brahmo Samaj. Adi means original, and from here we come to know that even Raja Ram Mohan Roy was also a gradualist reformer, not a radical reformer. Regarding Sati, he was radical, but otherwise, for example, he did not, he gave only, these people, they are giving lip service, except for Keshav Chandra Sen, they are giving lip service to issue of casteism. Right? Women related issues, they are also majorly picked up around the time period of 1850s or onwards. Before 1850, women related issues of marriage, etc., they are not being picked up. Very sensitive matter. Right? And your Brahmo Samaj of India, BSOI, 1866, it is set up by KCS, Keshav Chandra Sen. This kind of scenario. फिर लास्ट में गड़बड़ हो गई. लास्ट में क्या गड़बड़ हो गई? लास्ट में गड़बड़ी हो गई that Keshav Chandra Sen, he married off his daughter. He married off his daughter when she was still a minor. So therefore, देखिए, you're not, बाहर तो सब लोग बाकी सबकी बेटियों को तो कह दिया आपने, अपनी बेटी के केस में क्या कहते हैं तुम्हारे, ठीक है? So this kind of scenario, right? So therefore there was another break in the Brahmo Samaj of India, and a new organization came out, Sadharan Brahmo Samaj. Right? So you see, we can say कि वैसे ही बहुत छोटी organization है, only upper caste are members. It is also getting split into three parts. So therefore, because of personality differences on goals and methods, personality based differences on goals and methods, they became reason for the failure of Brahmo Samaj. Right? So write down. Devendra Nath Tagore. Devendra Nath Tagore. Devendra Nath Tagore. In brackets, DBT. DBT. Devendra Nath Tagore. In brackets, DBT. Right? Took over leadership. After death of Roy, 1833. After death of Roy in 1833. After death of Roy in 1833. 1833. Next point. Brahmoism slash BS 1828. Brahmoism slash BS 1828. Brahmoism slash BS 1828 was a major religious movement religious movement, was a major religious movement based on monotheism, based on monotheism, based on monotheism among educated middle class upper castes, educated middle class upper castes Bengalis, educated middle class upper castes Bengalis, educated middle class upper caste Bengalis, middle class upper caste Bengalis. इन ब्रैकेट्स डाला गया कि दैट इज नॉट अमंग मासेस. इससे हमें क्या समझ में आ रहा है? दैट इज नॉट अमंग मासेस, दैट इज नॉट अमंग मासेस, ब्रैकेट्स क्लोज्ड, नॉट अमंग मासेस, ब्रैकेट्स क्लोज्ड, नॉट अमंग मासेस, ब्रैकेट्स क्लोज्ड. नेक्स्ट राइट डाउन. डीबीटी gave organizational strength, DBT gave organizational strength to BS 1828, DBT gave organizational strength to BS 1828, DBT gave organizational strength to BS 1828. Mane, he was regarding Raja Ram Mohan Roy, we are talking more about the ideas of Raja Ram Mohan Roy, but the utility or the main contribution of देवेंद्रनाथ टैगोर वॉज ऑर्गेनाइज, मतलब ही वॉज अ गुड मैनेजर, ही इज अ गुड सीईओ. भाई एक तो स्टीव जॉब्स हो गया, स्टीव जॉब्स के थे आइडियाज, और फिर टिम कुक हो गया, वो भाई अच्छा मैनेजर है. आइडियाज तो एक होता है ऑर्गेनाइजेशनल मैन जो मैनेजर अच्छा होता है, और एक होता है आइडियोलॉग, राइट. सो ही इज अ मोर ऑफ अ मैनेजर. सो गेव ऑर्गेनाइजेशन स्ट्रेंथ टू BS 1828. नेक्स्ट पॉइंट. केशव चंद्र सेन, केशव चंद्र सेन, केशव चंद्र सेन in brackets KCS, Keshav Chandra Sen in brackets KCS, was a radical reformer, was a radical reformer. KCS was a radical reformer, while DBT was a gradualist, while DBT was a gradualist, while DBT was a gradualist. That is wanted, that is wanted, that is wanted gradual reforms, that is wanted gradual reforms, that is wanted gradual reforms. In brackets ताला कर लिख लो. Mild goals, mild methods, mild goals, mild methods, mild goals, माइल्ड मेथड्स. माइल्ड माने हल्के, भारी गोल भी नहीं लेना ना और ज्यादा मेहनत भी नहीं करनी है ना. ऐसा कुछ नहीं. अपन का ऐसा देखो 6 अटेम्प्ट है, 6 अटेम्प्ट में हो जाए यूपीएससी, ठीक है. ऐसा फर्स्ट अटेम्प्ट हाउ टू क्लियर यूपीएससी इन फर्स्ट अटेम्प्ट. अपन ग्रेजुअल, ठीक है. ऐसा कुछ नहीं सारी कोचिंग एक ही बारे में करनी है, सॉरी 4 बजे उठना है. आराम से उठेंगे, शांति से पढ़ेंगे, 6 साल है, रिलैक्स. दिस काइंड. सो ग्रेजुअलिस्ट. माइल्ड गोल्स, माइल्ड मेथड्स, है ना. मॉडरेट गोल्स, मॉडरेट मेथड्स, इसका मतलब ग्रेजुअलिस्ट. ये है इसका मतलब ग्रेजुअल रिफॉर्म्स का. नेक्स्ट पॉइंट. KCS was radical, KCS was radical, KCS was radical, KCS was radical as he argued strongly in favor of, as he argued strongly in favor of women related reforms, as he argued strongly in favor of women related reforms. Example against child marriage and pro widow remarriage. Example against child marriage and pro widow remarriage, and pro widow remarriage. ब्रैकेट में स्टार लगा के WR कर लो यार इसको, या WRM कर लो, बहुत बार आएगा. WRM कर लो, विडो रिमैरिज, ठीक है ना. विडो रिमैरिज प्लस अटैक्ड, प्लस अटैक्ड कास्टिज्म, प्लस अटैक्ड कास्टिज्म, plus attacked casteism, plus attacked casteism, and questioned, plus attacked casteism, and questioned high caste leadership, high caste leadership, high caste leadership of BS 1828, questioned high caste leadership of BS 1828 कि भाई low caste people are not leaders in Brahmo Samaj, why? And supported intercaste marriages, and supported intercaste marriages, and supported intercaste marriages. So therefore you see, because of these reasons he is called, these factors he is called radical, right? Not mild goals, बड़े goals, right? Methods पे भी आएंगे, strong methods पे कैसे. Anyways, लिखिए next point. Issue of caste and women, issue of caste and women were considered sensitive. Issues of caste and women were considered sensitive, were considered sensitive by gradualists, were considered sensitive by gradualists like DBT, were considered sensitive by gradualists like DBT in early 19th century. In early 19th century, अर्ली माने कि ठीक है, मतलब ऐसा अर्ली भी नहीं है, 1830s आ चुका है, तो मतलब ऐसा मतलब प्री 1850 उस तरह से है. Therefore DBT feared, therefore DBT feared, therefore DBT feared alienation, therefore DBT feared alienation of Hindus, DBT feared alienation of Hindus from Brahmo Samaj, from Brahmo Samaj, from Brahmo Samaj. Next point. KCS tried to make Brahmo Samaj, KCS tried to make BS 1828, KCS tried to make BS 1828 a mass movement, a mass movement, by spreading it among common man, by spreading it among common man, by spreading it among common man, comma outside Calcutta and even Bengal, outside Calcutta and even Bengal, outside Calcutta and even Bengal. Plus he started missionary activities, plus he started missionary activities, mission ARY, missionary activities, started missionary activities. That is wanted Brahmoism, that is wanted Brahmoism, that is wanted Brahmoism as an alternate religion to Hinduism. That is wanted Brahmoism as an alternate religion to Hinduism. Wanted Brahmoism as an alternate religion to Hinduism. While DBT did not want this. 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 Because as per DBT, even talking about caste is sensitive, talking about women is sensitive. Now you tell the people that leave your religion and adopt a new religion. ये तो और भी ज़्यादा radical है ना? This is even more radical कि धर्म ही छोड़ दो अपना, है ना? So next point, radicalism of KCS. इसके ब्रैकेट में स्टार लगा के वैसे लिख सकते हो. तो ये हो गए आपके strong methods. तो पहले हमने डिस्कस किया strong goals of KCS. अभी आगे strong methods, ब्रैकेट में स्टार लगा के strong methods. Missionary activities, right? Going outside Calcutta, going outside Bengal, going to the common man. These are strong methods, है ना? Brackets closed. स्ट्रॉन्ग मेथड्स. तो स्ट्रॉन्ग गोल्स स्ट्रॉन्ग मेथड्स हो गए, उधर माइल्ड गोल्स माइल्ड मेथड्स हो गए. ठीक है, तो ये डिफरेंस है. नेक्स्ट पॉइंट, radicalism of KCS and differences with DBT. Radicalism of KCS and differences with DBT. Radicalism of KCS and differences with DBT caused a split. Caused a split. Caused a split. Therefore, caused a split. Therefore, KCS setup, therefore KCS setup, BSOI, KCS setup, BSOI, 1866, KCS setup, BSOI 1866, in brackets Brahmo Samaj of India, Brahmo Samaj of India, BSOI 1866, ये अपना कोड हो गया. ब्रह्मो समाज ऑफ इंडिया and DBT setup Adi Brahmo Samaj 1866. DBT setup Adi Brahmo Samaj 1866. DBT setup Adi Brahmo Samaj 1866. इन ब्रैकेट्स डाला लगा कि आदि इज इक्वल टू ओरिजिनल. आदि इज इक्वल टू ओरिजिनल. आदि इज इक्वल टू ओरिजिनल. Brackets closed. Next point. Efforts of KCS led to Brahmo Marriages Act. So see, he is also a person who believes in using British authority. Brahmo Marriages Act 1872. Under which 1872, under which WRM, widow remarriages, under which widow remarriages and intercaste marriages, under which widow remarriages and intercaste marriages were legally valid, under which widow remarriages and intercaste marriages were legally valid. In brackets, Mayo 6972. That is from 1869 to 1872. Mayo was the viceroy. Mayo 1869-72. Full stop. Failed because it required bride and groom to leave Hinduism, to convert from. It required bride and groom, dulhan or dulha, bride and groom, BRIDE GROOM, bride and groom, to convert from Hinduism to Brahmoism. To convert from Hinduism to Brahmoism. So somewhere DBT is proven right, that if you'll say to Hindus that you should leave Hinduism and adopt Brahmoism, so not many are going to do so. That's why conversion became a reason for failure of this act bringing some real change, ऐसा हम कह सकते हैं. Next point, in 1878 further split. In 1878 further split. SPLIT, split. In BSOI 1866. When KCS married off his minor daughter. बुक्स में लिखा हुआ है KCS married. मैंने ऑफ ऐड कर दिया है, ठीक है ना, मैरिड ऑफ हिज माइनर डॉटर। therefore now formation of therefore now formation of साधारण therefore now formation of साधारण BS, साधारण ब्रह्म समाज, साधारण ब्रह्म समाज 1878, साधारण ब्रह्म समाज 1878, साधारण ब्रह्म समाज 1878। therefore BS failed, therefore BS failed, therefore BS failed due to personality differences, due to personality differences on goals and methods, on goals and methods, and multiple splits, and due to multiple splits, personality differences on goals and methods and due to multiple splits, right? Next write down Maharashtra, next independent, ये खत्म हो गया। नेक्स्ट राइट डाउन महाराष्ट्र, एक नया रीजन महाराष्ट्र, महाराष्ट्र, इसमें राइट डाउन फर्स्ट सब पॉइंट। तो इसमें ऑर्गेनाइजेशन थी परमहंस मंडली, परमहंस, परमहंस मंडली, परमहंस मंडली 1849, परमहंस मंडली 1849, परमहंस मंडली 1849, ठीक। वर्कड लाइक यंग बंगाल, वर्कड लाइक यंग बंगाल, वर्कड लाइक यंग बंगाल, माने इसके जो मेथड्स थे, इसके जो बिलीफ्स थे, वो सारे यंग बंगाल जैसे थे। अथीज्म, वेस्टर्न एजुकेशन, टोटल फेथ इन लॉजिक, वर्कड लाइक यंग बंगाल, therefore failed like young Bengal, worked like young Bengal, therefore failed like young Bengal, failed like young Bengal। नेक्स्ट ऑर्गेनाइजेशन प्रार्थना समाज, प्रार्थना समाज, प्रार्थना समाज 1867, in brackets PS 1867, PS 1867, प्रार्थना समाज PS 1867, प्रार्थना समाज PS 1867। फर्स्ट सब पॉइंट, सेटअप बाय आत्माराम, सेटअप बाय आत्माराम पांडुरंग, सेटअप बाय आत्माराम पांडुरंग, plus efforts of KCS, plus efforts of KCS। So see, KCS wanted to spread ideas of Brahmoism even outside Bengal, so his efforts, founder he is not, but his efforts are there, plus efforts of KCS in setting up, plus efforts of KCS in setting up, efforts of KCS in setting up। Main personalities is equal to, main personalities is equal to, हाँ हाँ हम प्रार्थना समाज के बारे में बात कर रहे हैं। मेन पर्सनैलिटी, मेन पर्सनैलिटीज इज इक्वल टू MG रानादे, MG रानादे, RG भंडारकर, MG रानादे, मधुर भंडारकरनी, RG भंडारकर, KT तेलांग, KT तेलांग, MG रानादे, RG भंडारकर, KT तेलांग। So founder is not that famous, these people are more famous, right? इसको समझने के लिए फालतू की मतलब इंग्लिश नहीं लिखेंगे, बट आपको मैं एक सिंपल सी चीज बता देता हूं। फॉर्मूला है स्ट्रॉन्ग गोल्स, strong goals but mild methods. Strong goals but mild methods. Strong goals but mild methods. माने कि caste will be a goal? Yes. Women related rights, child marriage, widow marriage will be a goal? Yes. But the way you approach these goals, they will be mild. So therefore बहुत ज़्यादा extra aggressive नहीं होना है, break from Hinduism, new religion, ये सब चीज़ें नहीं करनी है. प्रेस का इस्तेमाल करेंगे, आर्टिकल लिखेंगे, ठीक, बट इस तरीके से. सो दैट इज व्हाट इज देयर, राइट. सो राइट डाउन focused on social reforms including issues of women, focused on social reforms including issues of women and caste, therefore had goals like of KCS, therefore had goals like of KCS, but followed method of gradualism, as did not want break from Hinduism, therefore methods like of DBT, did not want break from Hinduism, therefore methods like of DBT, बस 4-5 लाइन और है. PS 1867, next line. PS 1867 opened branches outside MH माने महाराष्ट्र. PS 1867 opened branches outside MH माने महाराष्ट्र, outside महाराष्ट्र. Example, Gujarat, Karachi, Madras. Gujarat, Karachi, Madras. Right. So ये है next topic, write down. Child marriage. अच्छा, ब्रैकेट में एक चीज स्टार लगा के लिख लो अलग से. आप लिखिए मद्रास, हमने क्यों नहीं लिखा? बिकॉज 3 है ना प्रेसिडेंसी. वाई वहां पे समहाउ ऑल द बुक्स दे मेंशन दैट कास्टिज्म वाज रिलेटिवली very high and education reforms were also slow and therefore slower progress of social reforms, right? So in general bracket में स्टार लगा, कहीं पे भी आप लिख लो, कहीं पे भी जहां पे जगह वहां लिख लो. Slow progress of social reforms in Madras, slow progress of social reforms, सारे social reforms, slow progress of social reforms in Madras due to high casteism, plus slow progress, high casteism and slow progress of Western education, bracket is closed. Slow progress of Western education, bracket is closed, right? तो ये है. अच्छा, अभी कुछ लिखवाऊंगा नहीं, बस आपके 2 मिनट और लेने मैंने, ठीक है. टॉपिक फॉर द नेक्स्ट क्लास इज गोइंग टू बी चाइल्ड मैरिज, राइट? सो विल डिस्कस चाइल्ड मैरिज, विल डिस्कस विडो मैरिज, राइट? So therefore, in the case of the child marriage, what is the issue? There was something called Ghar Bandhan ceremony. As per the Ghar Bandhan ceremony, the rule was, it is coming from religion. The rule was that marriage will take place before puberty. That means a girl child who is even 1 year old, 2 year old, she can be married. But she will move to husband's home only after puberty. That means she will stay with her family until she reaches puberty and she'll move to husband's home only after puberty. So घर में एक तरीके से रिश्ता पक्का हो गया, बंधन, बंधन, right? So घर बंधन ceremony, right? That is there, right? So this was the reason for child marriage. There was a religious belief in घर बंधन ceremony, and therefore this was the reason for child marriage, right? Second issue that we see is that child marriage issue was also related to widow remarriage issue. Why? Because of high age gap. Many of the times there was high age gap between the husband and wife. Right? Wife is a child. Right? And by the time she is reaching puberty, right? That is commencement of marital life. बुढ़ा टपक गया, old man gone, right? Because let's say marriage took place at when she was just 1, high age gap was there. Let's say the man is at mid 40s, let's say, ऐसा भी होता था, right? Especially where these people, the husband family was rich and the bride's family was poor. There the age gap phenomenon thing was even more high, right? So this is how the things were. So बुढ़ा टपक गया, let's say at 55 age, at 60, या फिर कुछ भी हो गया, accident मतलब कुछ भी हो गया, age gap is high. As a result, when she's just a child still, she's just 13 years of age, 14 years of age or whatever, right? And she's a widow. And widow remarriage was not allowed by Hinduism. So therefore, she has to spend life without any life companion. Right? So therefore, the reform related to child marriage was also related to reform related to widow remarriage. Right? So these two issues are intertwined with each other, and major role which was played in this widow remarriage, which we'll discuss after the child marriage, major role was played by Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar. Right? Plus also by organizations like Prarthana Samaj. Right? So we'll discuss क्या है, किस प्रकार से है, ठीक है? तो in the next class we'll meet and we'll discuss. Thank you for your time. God bless you. Take care.